You all right? You've got a cold? Or hay
No,
fever?
I've got really bad hay fever,
Oh,
and the moment
horrible.
I turn the fan off because
It
of all the
comes, yeah,
humidity, I become
yeah,
instantly sort of stuffed up. I'll turn the fan
congested.
back on now.
Yeah. Oh.
Hello and welcome to Quiet Riot. We're doing a little midnight debate debrief. I'm
And
Alex.
I'm Naomi. I'm here with my cup of Horlicks late into the night. Alex and I have just listened to the last of the big leader debates, complete with terrible acoustics. At Nottingham Trent University, and I think a sort of background hum of what sounded like a protester trapped in the aircon unit. But I thought Michelle Hussein handled that quite well.
Yeah, once she acknowledged it, she took a long time to acknowledge it, which was weird. Everyone was trying to ignore it as if it wasn't happening. But once she acknowledged it, it was good. It actually made me quite angry, you know.
What that somebody was trying to, I mean, because what Michelle said, which I thought was good, was, tonight is about our democracy, and a really important part of our democracy is the right to protest.
Sure.
So if you can hear,
But democracy wasn't only happening outside, it was also happening inside. And there was one point where, a disabled woman was trying to ask a question and she was inaudible and had to be asked what she was asking twice because the person outside was shouting. And what the person outside was shouting was inaudible anyway and unintelligible. So it's not like they were making some kind of point, but they were basically shouting over a black disabled woman who had that little moment to ask the Prime Minister of the country a difficult question. And to me, that was a really neat summary of the sort of protest that works and is catchy and constructive, and the sort of protest that is just designed to make the person protesting feel good about themselves, but not only achieves nothing in the wider context, but is actually destructive. But
and detracted from,
yeah,
none of us could concentrate, and you and I were WhatsApping each other. And you asked, where is the Prime Minister's security detail? And I replied, they've gone down William Hill.
yes. Anyway, we thought you might like to hear our hot takes. Even though it's late, we thought we'll hit the record button and let you know what we thought. So, first takeaway, Naomi.
My first takeaway, or my kind of like overarching takeaway, is that I think the Conservative Party will be relatively pleased with Sunak's performance, and that it was an improvement on previous performances from their perspective. He repeated his key sound bites over
Yeah.
and over. He landed the lines he will have been briefed to land. Whether or not that will have worked and been effective in persuading anybody who was watching it to vote differently, I don't know. Whereas I suspect Labour will have thought marginally better at coping with the incessant interruption from Sunak, but he didn't quite land some of the points that I think he actually had formed some pretty good opinion on
Yeah.
in the same pithy way as Sunak did.
Yeah, I think I would broadly agree with that assessment, but that assessment is a subjective one. We're trying to imagine ourselves as the sort of advisors to Sunak and what would we want to see. And I think if I was that person, I'd be quite pleased with tonight. I thought he put in a decent shift,
Yeah.
basically. He was combative and he landed a couple of very good blows. But here's the thing, what the Conservative team wanted him to do and what the country wants may not be the same thing. And what I found quite interesting is that about a third of the way through, maybe even halfway through, I was thinking, oh God, he's winning this quite comprehensively, Sunak, right?
Yeah.
He's absolutely bossing it and he's really aggressive and he's showing a sort of macho energy that a lot of people will associate with leadership. But what happened was that as the thing went on, I felt that Starmer imposed himself via his quietness in a very strange way. And I thought when Sunak had effectively exhausted himself a little bit from being aggressive, Starmer started offering answers. For instance, his answer to a question about how will he ensure that women's interests are represented. And he gave what I thought was a really good answer.
Oh, interesting. That's interesting. I thought that was a weak answer.
I love that answer. It was all about not having every answer and every idea yourself, but enabling a team to basically work as a team. And I thought that actually exposed the Sunak presidential I'm the bee's knees thing and paid dividends actually quite instantly. Because when the question went to Sunak, he said, and I think I'm quoting, "I'll tell you why you can trust me, because I have 2 daughters."
Yeah.
We've talked a lot about the polling, haven't we?
Mm-hmm.
And we've talked a lot about who are the undecideds. And the undecideds are overwhelmingly women. And my sense is that that very macho, very aggressive thing will not go down that well with women. And actually, the more consensual, let's work as a team, let's bring the country together. I'm just trying to respect everyone. It's not always easy. I will make mistakes, but I'm moving from a place of wanting to give people dignity. I think that sort of message might go down a lot better with undecided female voters.
Sure. Well, this woman is not undecided. That much is true. So it feels like you're maybe suggesting, not on the women question specifically, but that it was the tortoise and the hare, and that the tortoise of Starmer won because he just kept steady and actually by about halfway through had probably overtaken, while Sunak the hare had exhausted himself. And I think that is a fair assessment. On the women question, I felt it was patronising. I think it is good to point out the diversity credentials of the Labour Party, and it goes much wider than the shadow cabinet. There are an enormous number of women in the Labour Party in positions of influence, and of course lots of women MPs and great PPCs having been selected. I think it's fine to kind of establish that credential, but to then not move on to policy area and what you'll do for women, I felt was a little bit frustrating. Whereas Sunak did that more quickly. He said, I'm the father of girls, failing, of course, to point out that his daughters are the children of multi-millionaires whom the world is always regardless of equality policy.
Let's just say that we read that particular answer differently, because I found myself laughing when he was saying, I want them to grow up in a country where they're, protected and all I was thinking was, well, so you better start working on American,
California.
Police protection, because they ain't going to grow up here, I don't think.
What about the start? So it was kind of rooted in restoring trust.
Yeah.
And the first questions were all about that. Or how are you going to help restore trust in politics? I didn't think Sunak sounded as forthright as Starmer did in that initial answer. But then he warmed up and got into attacking Starmer and having changed his mind over so many policy issues that have been dumped since previously being announced by the Labour Party in recent years. What did you make of that? Do you think people by the end of it will have felt that one was more trustworthy than the other?
Look, I think Starmer was smart to weave Gamblegate, as it's become known, with Partygate and PPE contracts and all of that. I think that's very clever.
Same.
And I think, to be honest, on this issue, he's pushing at an open door. Every piece of research we've looked at shows there's a complete collapse in trust in the Conservative leadership. And so, to be honest, I don't think it's a particularly useful question. If people end up voting for Rishi Sunak over Starmer, it won't be because they suddenly trust the Conservative Party again. It will be for other reasons. It will be because they believe his promises and his threats on tax. It will be because they see him as much stronger on immigration. It will be for other reasons. It won't be because they see him as more trustworthy as Starmer. I think that boat has sailed.
Well, talking about trust, they did, of course, and they being Conservative Party HQ, change their Twitter handle during the debate, very much as they did back in 2019, to a tax fact check handle name.
Yeah.
and they're directing people to a website which you plug your details in about whether you're a pensioner or an earner or unemployed, and whether you're a homeowner, whether you're going to buy a new boiler, etc. And regardless of how you answer it, it tells you you are going to be poorer
Yeah.
and more heavily taxed by Labour.
And harvest your data.
And, well, of course, and this is the Conservative playbook. It's the safety first method of campaigning. It's how the Tories always do it. But I think this time it's much harder for them to defend it after 14 years of government. But nonetheless, he's doing it anyway. Stick with me. It might not be great, but it's going to be even worse.
Yeah.
Under Labour,
I mean,
which is such a depressing proposition to go to the country with.
So that it's interesting. I thought Sunak lost comprehensively that first 5-10 minutes of the debate. I thought his answers were weak. I thought Starmer did a very good job. I thought Starmer did a very good job with dealing with his first interruption. And Sunak actually looked really angry and crestfallen when Starmer said to him, if you took a bit more time to listen to the people in the studio and the people out there, you would be a little less out of touch.
Yeah.
And there was a big round of applause, and Sunak's face looked like thunder.
It did. And he kept staring at Starmer. Starmer refused to make eye contact and just kept looking at Michelle Hussein the whole time, wasn't going to get riled by it.
Yeah. Then it moved on to topics like immigration, okay? And I think on the immigration question is probably where Sunak had his best spell of the whole thing. Not because he had any genuine answers or policies, but because I think he had almost a systemic advantage during that bit. Because saying we'll process them more efficiently and will collaborate with authorities to stem the sort of flow of immigration, it's a bureaucratic answer. It's not sexy, is it?
No.
To say that we will do the stuff that government is meant to do well. It's not sexy. I'm going to stick them all on a plane and send them to Rwanda is sexy. It is ludicrous, but it displays a sort of peacock dynamism that people who are concerned about the immigration question might like.
Well, I thought his stinger line, though, that Sunak got over very well, and it came across to me as completely unscripted and unbriefed by his team, and that's why I think it maybe landed very well, was his retort to Starmer when Starmer said, well, we will negotiate with the countries that these people have come from, and we'll be multilateral about dealing with it rather than, as you say, shoving them all on a plane to Rwanda. So comes back with, what, you're going to negotiate with the Ayatollah and the Taliban, after listing the countries where many people on small boats are escaping from: Afghanistan, Syria, etc., Iran. And
it wasn't unscripted, by the way. Shaps came up with that line about 3-4 days ago when he was doing the media rounds, and I thought at the time
Starmer should have been even better prepared and should have reported back with.
It's a good line and a good point, and I thought it will be used, to be honest. And Labour should have been better prepared.
Starmer should have been ready for that then. And I didn't hear Shap say it, but it was a Conservative-led government that supported the withdrawal from Afghanistan. There was a lot that he could have gone on that and didn't. I think for me, what really came across was that question about boats, small boats, came immediately after the question about welfare and the number of people who are now on long-term sick. And the elephant in the room that we often mention is Brexit. People won't talk about Brexit, but neither are we really talking about the lasting impact of COVID and government decision at the time that caused the virus to run rampant and for so many people to be left so unwell, unable to work. And
including
it seems to me,
Eat Out to Help Out, of course.
Exactly. He was the architect of Eat Out to Help Out that really did help that spread and that spike towards the end of that summer. And, we don't close our borders to viruses, just to vulnerable people, would seem to me to be the really obvious line that Labour could have gone on there.
But you see, he's also the architect, Sunak is, of current difficulties in local councils. Really, quite literally, he came up with a new funding formula when he was communities minister.
Yeah, local government.
He actually boasted about siphoning money away from urban councils into rural areas, counties and towns. And then shoved that plan through when he was Chancellor. So it really is his baby from birth to death. And I am amazed at the lack of briefing, the lack of preparation at Labour HQ, that they don't have that ready to go for Starmer as a response. Because that video is out there of him
It is.
going, yeah, aren't I clever? I've diverted loads of money away from big cities.
Do you think it's because every time Starmer mentions anything about the record, whether it's Sunak's record personally or Conservative government over the last 14 years, the retort from Sunak is, we're talking about the future, this is about the next parliament, stop looking, and that Labour feel that actually is working with voters. They don't want to look back.
That would make it strategic, right? And I don't think it is strategic. I think, to be honest, I think Starmer is genuinely shocked every time Sunak kind of goes a bit lower and says something that is more obviously a lie and says something that is more obviously a ludicrous simplification. Like, he looked really shocked when Sunak was saying, yeah, I'm going to send 50,000 people to Rwanda. He kept saying, that's not true. He literally kept muttering, how can you say that? It's not true. And my feeling is that people expect him to be incredibly good at that sort of thing because he's a very experienced lawyer. But he's not a lawyer in some American TV drama. He used to be a barrister. They play in incredibly strict rules about how much they're allowed to stretch the truth, as it were, and how much they're allowed to massage the facts because they're officers of the court. And to me, it seems like every time Sunak goes a little bit lower and says something that is obviously ludicrous or obviously a lie, like the story that I kept warning about today, the Darren Jones recording that the Telegraph has basically fed to CCHQ because they had the ad ready to go.
Yeah.
Where basically Darren Jones is asked, will 28 billion be enough for the green transition? And he says, oh, no, we'll need a lot more. It will be hundreds of billions. And then the recording cuts out, right?
Yeah.
It was really obvious to me from the get-go, because Darren Jones has said this 100 times, that this 28 billion is only seed money. It's the same as Biden's program. It's the same as the EU Green Deal. It's seed money that's there to attract 5 times, 6 times, 10 times private investment, right? So the 28 billion a government puts in is not the cost of the green transition. The cost of the green transition is probably $500 billion. But what government is doing is providing incentives, seed money, research money. It's doing what government should be doing.
The catalyst.
In that kind of market. Yes, exactly. And it was completely obvious to me that that recording had been tightly edited to give an impression that was completely untrue. I mean, shame on the Telegraph. 10 years ago, this was a newspaper of record.
Quiet Riot. So Brexit came up. Brexit did come up. There was a small business owner, a woman who asked, what are you going to do to help me trade with Europe? And Sunak did not answer the question at all. He did not talk about how to improve the Brexit deal and the trading environment for British businesses. He said, the best thing I can do for you is cut your business rates and abolish self-employment national insurance contributions. Nothing on the trading relationship at all.
Yeah.
Starmer then did have a pretty decent answer on it, talking about the Duff deal that Johnson pushed through at all costs and was always going to be completely crap, and that he didn't accept at all that we couldn't negotiate a much better deal. And then Sunak, that opens the door for Sunak to come back saying, of course you can get a better deal. I've sat across the table from these people. I know you can get a better deal, but the price will be freedom of movement. Oh, be still my beating heart. And then talked about how he had already managed to get Horizon back on the agenda for the UK and negotiated the Windsor framework. I would have liked to have seen a bit more, of course, because I am a Euromaniac, from Starmer on it, but I thought he at least didn't even miss a beat in answering this woman's
Yeah.
question directly, saying the current deal is terrible. I agree. I'm very sorry that your business and hundreds of thousands of businesses like yours are suffering in the same way. We're going to get a better deal.
And I mean, the fact that Starmer cannot talk about it for political reasons doesn't mean we can't talk about it, because at some point people have to start discussing the very real and simple reality that there is a reason net migration doubled the moment that freedom of movement was not there. And this is something that I hear from business leaders I speak to all the time. And what all of them say is that when you have an open system, basically businesses can expand, they can contract, people can come here and work for a bit, then go to another country to work for a bit, travel around, they don't have to commit their future to this country. When you have a points-based system, everyone that you need that comes here effectively makes a permanent decision to move their life to the UK. So what happens is you have a much higher rate of migration. And this was something that every expert explained at the time they were going on about an Australian point system. Every expert was saying point systems are not low migration systems. They tend to be high migration systems.
Yes.
Because they say these are the points, whoever can get them is in. And so a lot of people make permanent decision. The moment you have a permanent point system in place, every decision becomes definitive and for life. And I think people need to start to grasp that. They need to start to grasp the idea that reciprocal freedom of movement actually is a very flexible thing that keeps immigration low. And it's sad that really this argument wasn't better articulated at the time of the referendum.
Absolutely. And of course, growth. What little growth we have had in the UK economy in recent years is not divorced from the very high levels of migration, inward migration we've seen. We do need migrant workers to help grow our economy if we aren't able to reproduce at a very high rate quickly,
Yeah.
and also skill people in the right place and deal with the multifactorial issues around housing and the location of work. You know, vacancies tend to be in the areas where often housing is at its highest price point, and certainly rents in the southeast and other places, and unemployment in other areas of the country. So it's simply not feasible to expect somebody who's unemployed in the northeast to come and take a job in the southeast, for instance, on a relatively low wage when rents are so extortionately high.
We're picking at old scabs now.
Yeah.
I am very aware of that.
There was a question, and a gentleman
Rob, you
basically stood
loved
up.
him, didn't you?
I thought he spoke for a nation.
Ian did not.
Oh no, I know, and I think the weird bit about Starmer. So basically, sorry for listeners that didn't watch the whole thing. Chap called Robert stood up and basically said, "Is this the best that we've got? The two of you? Is that really what it's come to? That we've got a choice between Tweedledum and Tweedledee?" He made a very odd claim about Starmer being in hock to some evil powers within the Labour Party or something like that. Ignoring that weird latter bit, I do think that will have resonated with a lot of people, and actually Ian himself, who is an Englishman in Greece rather than a Greek man here in England on this podcast with me, I did say to him, what did you make of it, the whole debate? And he just replied, awful. And actually, when you read Ian's Twitter thread of the whole debate, he finds them both pretty depressing as well. So I think he probably did like what was behind Rob's question. And I think there will have been some sympathy with the voters in general. And I don't think yet that there is a huge draw towards Starmer and the Labour Party. There is just this huge revolt away from the Conservatives, and that is what will deliver a Labour government next week.
Okay, so I'll try to represent Ian in this particular bit of the conversation, and I think what was behind Rob's question was, I like that Nigel Farage, he says it as it is. So I'm afraid, in that camp, and he was the first and only audience member that was interviewed by Laura Kuenssberg afterwards in the
Oh, right.
spin-off.
What did he say? I didn't watch. I turned off to come and record this with you.
They were both rubbish because neither of them wanted to say that they're great. And I think anyone who goes out to the world representing this country, we are the best country in the world, should not be afraid to say how great we are.
Well, do you know what? I think I agree. I actually agree. I think the lack of ambition for our country is horribly low from the political classes at the moment. There is a fear of talking up what we could and should be, and we were such a more trusted trading partner and ally on the world stage, and our soft power was so enormous, and all of that was eroded by the last 14 years of terrible austerity. We were lagging behind other advanced economies in terms of our response and rebound from the financial crisis under Cameron, who then caused this stupid referendum that he was always going to bloody well lose. Johnson then with his bloody bombast, hardest possible Brexit deal, humiliating us on the world stage wherever he went. And then Truss, less said the better, and now Sunak. And I would just love for a politician to stand up and say, I bloody love this country, and to make a patriotic case for internationalism, multilateralism, and Britain being back. So I don't agree with how he, with where this guy's coming from, but
I don't disagree with the argument internally. I do disagree with the argument in terms of out-facing, because I think we had confidence and bombast, and as you said, it resulted in the greatest loss of confidence and reputation we've ever experienced. And so I'm not sure that the world needs to hear words of confidence from the UK. I think the world needs to see actions that display steadiness, confidence, a certainty in our own identity, a certainty of our place in the world. I think that's what is lacking. Words of confidence, we've had nothing but for the last 7 years. So someone quiet that restores stability will do wonders for our reputation internationally. But given a choice between the two, I would much rather take the confident
and that is the choice.
stable actions. Yeah.
Starmer is not going to morph into a charismatic figure anytime soon, but he is a steady pair of hands who will do the quiet diplomacy effectively.
I can't see anyone around the world going, this is not someone I can do business with.
Exactly.
Which is sort of a good step forward.
Well, it is now getting very late. We should probably wrap it up. Thank you all so much for listening. The full show will be out a couple of days late this week, but it is going to be a goodie.
Yes, I don't want to spoil the surprise, but we have dispatches. Let us tell you, Quiet Riot has been travelling the width and breadth of primarily England, I must admit. So we'll bring you some of that on Friday. You've still got time to send us your questions. Just message us at Quiet Riot Pod on socials or email quietriotpod@gmail.com.
Alex will be flying solo, so please, listeners, do send him some really tough questions in my absence. I'll be back next week.
Thanks, Naomi. Listeners, I'll see you all in a couple of days to digest all the week's other news. But for now, farewell.
Good night.
Quiet Riot is an audio production by Cooler Heads with Naomi Smith, Alex Andreou and Kenny Campbell. Music by Mariana Sangita. Artwork by Simona Canellu. Quiet Riot is a co-production with Sandstone Global. Quiet Riot. That's better.